Okay, I've got 1:45 India time right now, 1:45 p.m. India time, which is my time is about 4:15 in the morning. So again, this is John Meredith. Welcome back. Hopefully you guys all took your exam. Looks like a lot of you passed it. Congratulations. Well done. Now we're going to continue on the journey here with Sumo Search Mastery. So we're going to talk about a lot of different commands and a lot of different operators that we use for creating log queries. That's really the focus of this. And then tomorrow, you're going to take what you learn and we're going to build security queries. So do some security queries. We'll also have a workshop for you tomorrow afternoon. But let's go ahead and take what we've got and let's go ahead and get things going. As I mentioned before, my only ask of you is if you've got a question, please ask it, okay? One thing I've learned through the years, and that is when you ask your question, hopefully you get your answer so you benefit, but you help the instructor help us understand what's important to you. So by asking your questions, you help us, like I said, focus on what's important. And then the other thing is that when you ask a question, everybody else in the room benefits from the question and the answer, and it typically gets them to think about their questions. So, and then they wind up, we cover the material in a very interactive way rather than, death by PowerPoint. So again, encourage you to ask your questions. I'll stop the video streaming now and let's go ahead and get this party started. So our goal here, our plan is we got a couple of slides, but really we're going to do this mostly by the labs. And so we have a different set of labs. There's 13 labs that we're going to do for this. And again, we're going to do this basically by hands-on exercise. And then the last hour will be devoted to getting certified. So I'm going to go for about an hour, break for 10 minutes, go for the rest of the hour, and then we'll take the certification exam, and that'll wrap it up for the day. So then you guys can get on with life. Let me skip that slide. All right. Again, I talked about this morning. Again, our data, the analytics, all that sort of thing. I don't necessarily have a strong need to repeat it. Suffice to say that I think Sumo provides something for everybody. And with Sumo, you can basically take your information from your various log systems and metrics and things like that, and you can turn it into actionable intelligence. And these days with cloud environments and all that sort of thing, it's probably why our focus has sort of changed from a logs and metric organization to things like observability. We want to be able to observe and be able to see across our environments and quickly identify issues and diagnose problems and all that fun stuff. So that's where things have probably changed for us. This is the demo I didn't run earlier because we had some problems. The data is still kind of wonky on that. This is a slide that we talked about before. Again, if you want to talk about data collection and learn how to set up collectors and sources, you probably want to sign up for our administration class, which will be offered at Illuminate. The next time we do public training, by the way, is during Illuminate. So we're building a bunch of new courses, 4 new certification courses for Illuminate, as well as a bunch of workshops. So kind of busy. And then search and analyze, and that's something we're going to focus on today, as well as visualizing and monitoring. This time I'll talk about the new dashboards, and we'll see how those play out for us. This is another slide you saw before with our hosted collectors, which are maintained by us. The installed collectors are little Java apps that you get to install on these remote machines if you want to grab log data from those machines or metric data. And we talked about the metadata tags. So a lot of this is rehash. What I would like you to do is I'd like you to log back into our training environment. And the reason I want you to log into the training environment for this is I know what the data looks like. I don't know what the data looks like in your respective company's environments. So that's why we use the training environment for all of this. And let me go ahead and add it here to the chat box. Add this information. So just like you did this morning, I want you to pick a number, a 3-digit number from 001 to 999. You can use the same one you used this morning. I want you to go to service.simologic.com. And again, for the email address, you're going to log in as training plus analyst with that 3-digit number at simologic.com. And the password, the current password is capital AUG, UST, numeral 2, numeral 1, exclamation mark. So I want you all to log in. And let's go ahead and have ourselves a good time. Okay. Now, if you do log in, and it looks like you all are logging in now, so like I said, I'll give it a minute here. Some of you I know have typing in your numbers, that's fine. You can use the same numbers you used from this morning, that's great. Or you can change different numbers if you want, that's up to you. We've got 999 different numbers that you can use, so help yourself. Again, if I go into help, or if you were to go into help, and if we were to go into documentation, under help, under documentation, if we click on the Start Here tab, again, under the Start Here chapter, under the Quick Start Labs and Tutorials, that link that I shared with you this morning, you'll find that we have our hands-on labs for Search Master. So I'm going to take this URL, which are going to be the labs that we're going to do right now, and I am going to paste and put that into it. So I'm going to paste that into here. You want to make sure you click on this. And again, I'm running Google Chrome, so I'm going to take this tab and I'm going to pin it down and put it in the corner here out of my way, because I want to be able to, and I want you to be able to switch back and forth between your lab environment and these labs. Okay. And again, as I said, we've got 13 labs here that we're going to do. And so that's going to be the focus of this. Now, I'm going to warn you, the first 3 labs have a lot of steps to them, and they're a little bit tedious and a little bit, a little bit tedious. Let's just call it what it is. After that, things get much simpler and much easier and much more straightforward. So you just got to bear with us on those first 3 labs, and we'll go to town and get through that and all that fun stuff. But basically, I want to go through all the stuff I didn't talk about before. So if you want to create a new search, right, new log search, it's that new blue button, log search. I didn't talk about these menu options down here. And there's a few other things I didn't talk about. So I'm going to take advantage of this time and talk about those, as well as I'm going to talk about new dashboards. All right. So if we start with lab number 1, search basics, metadata and keyword, right? We recommend that you start your query with a source category. So they have us starting off here with, and if I start typing in, the type ahead starts to help me out here a little bit. So I start typing in, excuse me, get my keyboard here so I can see it, underscore source, and now I can see everything starts with source category equals, then I can start labs / Apache, and then I can see my Apache access or my Apache error logs. Now, by default, when you set up a query, it's going to run for 15 minutes. That's the default test question. And so if I want to run this, I can either hit the enter key on my keyboard or click the start button, and it will go out and query the last 15 minutes of log data here from my Apache access logs. Pretty simple, right? Grabbing my metadata. Now, if I want to look for specific things from those log messages, like for example, I want to see messages that have, say, a 404 error code, I can type in the word and then I can type in what the number is I'm searching for, 404. Now, when I run this, you'll notice I'm down to only 225 messages, and all the messages all have a 404 somewhere in them. Okay, a 404. Now, truth be told, you don't have to type in the and. You just put a space in between these 2 fields. An and is automatically implied. Okay, an and is automatically implied. You get the same results. So if you don't specify an operator, it assumes an and. If you want to have an or, you can type in an or. It could be uppercase, lowercase or, doesn't really make any difference. Now, be careful here, though. Logically, what's happening is I'm seeing my Apache access logs, all of them, or any log that has a 404 in it. That's why you're seeing different formats. These are JSON formats and stuff. So I've got about 24,373 results here. Lots of results. So be very careful here about using your ands and ors. If you want to see a 404 within the access logs, then the operator should be an and. And as I said, if you don't specify it, it automatically implies an and. So that's what we're trying to show you here with regards to steps 1 and 2. Okay. Now, I can also use wildcards. So for example here, I can say I want to see my Apache access logs, and anything that has the word error in it, oops, excuse me, error, excuse me, or check with a star. Now this means checked in, checked out, anything that starts CHEK. So I can sit there and combine my ands and ors in here. I'm looking for either the word error or check, and regardless of what it ends with, checked out, checked in, whatever. And again, I'm looking from within my Apache access log. That's why this and is there. So you can start to filter for what you want. Now, besides looking at my Apache access logs, I can also look at my Apache error logs. In fact, I can do something like this. Source category equals lab/Apache/error. So I can see either my access logs or my Apache error logs. Oh, I'm sorry. I put an and in there. Shame on me. This should be an or. I don't have the same message in both logs. Okay. Somebody asked the question, is the exclamation mark and the not both the same? Yes, they are. They're both the same. So if I want to not something, I can do that. By the way, here when I'm looking at my both Apache error logs and my Apache access logs, if you look at the messages, you'll see down here at the host, the name, and then the category. So I can see which came from my Apache access logs and which came from my Apache error logs. If I scroll down here, eventually I should see something with my error logs here. Let me just jump to the end. There we go. Apache error logs. Now, interesting thing to note. Remember, we talked about this field browser. So down here is my field browser. And these fields are either my standard metadata fields, like my source host, source category, and that sort of thing. Or these fields come in here through something called the field extraction rule. And we teach you how to set up field extraction rules in the admin class as well. But what I want to point out is that under here, I have two sources. And if I click on this source to open it up, I see that out of the 9,452 messages here, 7,637 are from my Apache access logs. 1,815 are from my Apache error logs. And I can see the breakdown in percentage. So this provides that information for me very handily and very easily if I need it. All right. So good. Let me get back to lab 1 here. Now, another way of approaching this, by the way, another way of approaching this information is that since these both start off the same way, lab/Apache/whatever, I could replace this with that wildcard character. And now this will give me the same basic results. It'll show me both my Apache error logs and my Apache access logs. And again, if I click on my source, there we go. I see that same information. Again, reminder by default, this is 15 minutes. And of course, you can change the time. We talked about changing this time before. Talked about that this morning. Okay. All right. So far, so good. All right. Let's talk a little bit about these commands here. If you want to take this query and you want to save it, you can click Save As, and of course, save it. And then if you save it, you can also bookmark it here as a favorite if you want. Information gives me a little panel about the information of this query. Sharing. You can share this query either by providing a complete full URL or a short URL. Now I could take this full URL, I could copy it, I could bring up another browser, a different browser, paste that information in, and it's still going to ask me to authenticate, right? Because we've got authentication enabled on our system. Then it will run this query and I can then see the results. Okay. So that's providing a full URL. This URL, this underscore code equals, that is for somebody who's working inside of Sumo Logic. They can create a new log search. They can paste that code in here And when they go to run it, it will resolve it to the time that you ran it, as well as the actual code itself. Now, you might ask yourself, well, gee, why can't I just take the code here and copy it and paste it through Teams or Slack or whatever? You can, but in some cases, some of those tools remove the pipe symbol. And that's why we recommend, if you want to share this with your colleagues or something, you can share it using one of these two links. Now, if I've got a query that's taken a long time, and so far the queries we've been running are very simple and very easy and very fast. If I've got a query that takes a long time, I'm sure you realize that if I were to close my browser up, that query is going to abnormally end, right? If that query is running and I close my browser, the query is going to abnormally end. Well, if you want the query to continue to run while you shut your browser down and shut your computer off and all that, you can pin that query. And when you pin that query, it's transferring control from your browser. Now the control of it's being managed by the server in the background. So it's running from the server in the background. And if you need to see where that pinned query is, if you go into your recents, you'll find that any pinned query is in your recents. It's under this icon right here. Another great test question. So hopefully by now you realize I'm trying to help you out and pass the test as easily as I can by pointing these things out as we go, okay? Now, if you want to transfer control back to your browser, because right now it's pinned and therefore the query is going to run from the server, it's being controlled by the server, you can unpin it and it's going to ask you to confirm. And so now you are in control, your browser session is in control of this query. Okay. This live tail, when I click on live tail, that opens up a live tail window. Live tail, only 20 or 10 people can run live tail in an environment by itself. So there's a hard limit of how many people can run live tail within your company. Only 10 people can do it concurrently. Okay. And what live tail does is it shows me data as it's coming into Sumo. So typically the only people who really need to run live tail are people who set up your collectors and your sources, people set up your field extraction rules. Those folks need to see data as it's being ingested. One thing that you notice, it does not highlight anything. If I want to highlight something, I can go in here and specify what it is I want to highlight. For example, I want to highlight HTTP. Maybe I want to highlight any 304s. Maybe I want to highlight IP. And so it will then highlight those various things for me. Okay. So that's live tail. It shows me data as it's being ingested into Sumo Logic. That's what that option is. By the way, you can also execute it by going to new and doing a live tail from here. Okay. I'll come back and talk about add monitor at the end of today. Okay. But add monitor basically turns this query into a monitor that I can use for alerts and things like that. But I will come back to that. All right. Now, at the end of the first lab here, it's got some review questions. So the first question is that when I type in that first line where the keywords are those keywords case sensitive? Or more importantly, is that first line case sensitive? What do you think? Is that answer true or false? Feel free to type it in the chat box. False, false, false. Absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. The keywords, that first line is case insensitive. So thank you very much. Well done. Second question. When I'm using ands and or operators, and is implicitly implied and or must be explicitly implied if I want to do that. Is that statement true or false? Getting excellent participation here, folks. Great. All of you are saying true. Absolutely correct. Thank you. And last one, last question. Keywords and metadata can use wildcards in LiveTail. May not have noticed it, but I ran my query here in LiveTail. It did have a wildcard in there, and it did in fact run. So that statement is true. May take a minute, but there's some results. So that third statement is true as well. So nice work, folks. Nice work. All right, so let's move on to lab number 2. Simple parsing, grouping, and filtering. Here we go. I could take my Apache access logs and my Apache error logs. I could aggregate them by source. Remember, there are two sources, right? So back to this, add a new line, throw in a pipe because I want to add an additional command, count by source. That count by is going to create this aggregates tab. And in this aggregates tab, I can see this 9,120, 7274 is from this source, 1846 is from this source. Okay. And this will always create the aggregates tab. Now, one thing that might not be intuitive to you yet, but now is a good time to mention it. And that is if I want to sit there and take information and I want to create a bar chart, a line chart, some sort of visualization, I need to have an aggregate statement in there. I need to have an aggregates tab. My messages tab does not have the ability to display bars and lines and things like that, even add to a dashboard. You can take this information and you can export it out if you want. And by the way, under the aggregates, you can also export your tabular data here if you want. You can download it as a CSV. But as far as rendering it as some sort of a visualization, you need that aggregate tab. And then there's a settings tab, which we'll talk about later, where you can change the settings that based on your visualization that you're looking at, you can change the various settings. So something else. Now, this exercise here, I am doing a parse regex. A parse regex is a regular expression. It was not created by Sumo Logic. It was created by the World Wide Web Consortium. So when I paste this code in here, this is looking at all of my Apache logs. In fact, let me comment out these two lines. To comment out a line, all you need is 2 forward slashes. 2 forward slashes. Now, you may want to add 2 forward slashes in the space if you like readability and things like that, but the forward slashes will comment those out. Now, again, I'm looking at my Apache logs, both my error logs and my access logs. And interestingly enough, when I look at my Apache error logs, I want to see an IP address. It's located right there. So it's in the body of my message. Right there is where the IP address is. If I'm looking at my Apache access logs, the IP address is right in the front. That's why I can't use a parse anchor. A parse anchor, they've got to be consistently formatted messages. They got to be in the same place every time. So, but I can use a parse regular expression. And if you were to do a search for regular expressions, and you'll find that there's a lot of, it might help if I turn that, spell this correctly here. There's a lot of information here about using regular expressions. And we can also use regular expression using the regex editor. So what we have here is we have a parse regex. Now, what that regex is doing and what it's asking for is it's going to create a field here called IP address. And it's looking for the following pattern: 1 to 3 digits, followed by a period, followed by 1 to 3 digits, followed by a period, followed by 1 to 3 digits, followed by a period, followed by 1 to 3 digits. Now, you and I know that sort of structure to be a version 4 IP address, right? 3 octet, an octet separated by periods or decimal points, whatever you want to call it. And that's what makes up an IP address. And so what we're going to do is we're going to parse that out using a parse regular expression. Okay. Is the regex based on the PCRE library? I'm not sure, Kishabab, but I'll let somebody else double check that. I mean, I know it's based on the regular expressions definitions. So I'm going through all these messages that I can, and I'm going to parse these things out. Now, one little thing I'm going to point out later, but I'm going to do it right now. Comment this line out again. You notice I've got about 8,397 messages. Now, when I parse, I am down to 7,350 messages. Why? When you do a parse expression, not only does it extract out the field that you want to extract, but it also uses filters. It filters your messages. And if I don't see an IP address format in here, I'm going to delete that message. And I'll talk about later how to prevent that from happening. But the point is that not only does a parse statement extract out what we want, but it also filters. I just want you to be aware of that. Okay. Okay. Excellent. And then I am going to count by that IP address field. So again, count is going to create my aggregates tab. And here in my aggregates tab, I can see there's my various IP addresses. Now, I can add a where clause to this if I want to. So let me add another line. Where underscore count, that's the results of my count, is greater than, we'll make it 500 here. See what we get back. Okay. I get back 4 values that are greater than 500. Great. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to deviate from the book here a little bit, and I want to talk a little bit about new dashboards. So I could take this visualization if I want to, and I can turn it into a lovely pie chart. And I can add this to a dashboard. Now I'm going to do this. You guys don't have to do anything, just watch. But I'm going to add this to a dashboard, and I'm going to call this my IP addresses of interest. And I'm going to create a new dashboard. I'm going to start with my initials and IP addresses. And I'm going to type in today's date, just because I do this all the time. Okay, and it lets me create a new dashboard. Now, this time I'm going to throw the switch to create a new dashboard user interface. So I'm going to throw this switch. And when I click add, now this is going to add this as a new dashboard. Now, what are some of the cool features of a new dashboard? Well, just like with the legacy dashboards, I can rearrange the structure of this to make it look the way I want it to. And just like the legacy dashboards, I can filter on what I want to filter on. So that's pretty simple. But in the new dashboards, if I want to edit this, I can actually edit it in place. I can actually modify the query right here. Also, if you want to add a new query here, you can do that. So if I want to here, I can add maybe a time series, and I can add another query in here. Apache access. And what I want to do here is I'm going to add another pipe. Sorry, pipe. Time slice. 1M. New line. Count by. Time slice and status code. Okay.
Time slice. TIME is missing in second line.
Sorry? Oh yeah, got it. See it. That's why we recommend you code a little bit, test a little bit here. There we go. Time slice. There we go. One more time. That's better. If your words don't show up in pink, that means they didn't get resolved properly. Oh, I see why. Prod. Hang on a second. Sorry, guys. One more thing. All right, good. So here's my data. Now I've got a time series. If I want to, I can add this to my dashboard. I can make this the size I want it to be, and I can add other things in here. So it's much easier in this new dashboarding tool to create dashboards and all that stuff. One other thing, by the way, if I edit this, I can also change, again, my display. I can change my palette. I can also go into various properties, and I can link my dashboards together. I can modify my axes, my legends. Over here where it says untitled, I can give the thing a name. And most importantly, with the visualizations, I can actually see the JSON code. So with the new dashboards, you can actually see the JSON code, and you can obviously modify it as you see fit. So there is that. So I think you're going to like the new JSON, the new dashboards. One thing I will say is that the new dashboards yet do not have that live feature, and that's why we haven't switched everybody over. Encourage folks to switch everybody over to that just yet. So there's new dashboards, and let me go back to my exercise here. And again, as you can see, they built a little dashboard here. That's what I'm basically doing. One thing in step 4 here of lab 2, it talks about it's a new query. You got a parse regex statement in here and a parse anchor. If you see the word parse by itself, that's a parse anchor. And the message here is real simple. You can have different types of parsing mechanisms in the same query. So I can have a parse regex, I can have a parse JSON, I can have a parse anchor, all in the same query if I want to. So you can have multiple parsing options, okay, in the same query. And that brings us to lab 3, where we're going to talk more about parsing options. So any questions on the first 2 labs? All right, in lab 3, we want to look at JSON logs. JSON logs are the latest little darling that exists in today's world, right? And I happen to know that as a source category, if I look at my labs/AWS/CloudTrail, I have a CloudTrail log, and that CloudTrail log is in JSON. So when I run this, I see that I've got a series of name and key value pairs. So here's my name, here's its value. Here's my name, here's its value. And actually, if I open it up, there's some other things in here. So here's my name, here's my value, okay? And what's cool about JSON is that this auto parse mode switch is set to auto parse mode. So when I run this, what it does for my JSON fields is it automatically parses out these fields and makes them available in my field browser. So when you come across a JSON log and your auto parse mode is set to auto parse, it automatically parses out these fields and puts them in your field browser. Does it automatically. Now, if I switch this back to manual mode, it doesn't do it automatically, which means when I look at my field browser, I don't have that many fields here, okay? So that's what that little switch is for. And basically, it's our way of recognizing, since JSON is the latest darling of the world, we make it easy for you to then use those fields by that auto parse mode. And that's what they're trying to tell you here at the start of lab 3. Okay. And now I've got these fields. Now I can count by these fields. So for example, if I go down here and look, there's something called AWS region. If I click on it, I can see all the different AWS regions that are being used. And if I want to check the checky box, you'll see it gets added to my display. So I can go through here and take any one of these fields, and I can add them if I want to. So this becomes very helpful and very, very, very easy for me to do. I don't really have to modify the code unless I want to do something like I want to count by. So maybe I want to count by AWS region. And so now it's showing me out of my 2,374, my breakdown across the various regions that you might see here. Okay. How to check AWS CloudWatch logs. Okay. You can also, if you've got a source collector with CloudWatch, you can use those logs as well. So we do happen to have CloudWatch in here as well. So there's CloudFront, CloudTrail, and I think we don't have CloudWatch. I've got them somewhere. So hopefully you have those logs to deal with. Apparently I don't have them here. So But yeah, you can use CloudTrail, CloudWatch, whatever you want. I think CloudWatch, as I recall, is in JSON as well. So that's my message. Now, let's take a look here a little bit at, well, actually, let me add some things here to this. If you want to rename a field, right? For example, this is called AWS region, right? And I really maybe want to call it something a little different. Maybe AWS underscore region. So one of the things that we can do in here is, again, we're already extracting it, but assuming we didn't extract it, we could, just bear with me a second here, folks. Let me just take those out for a second. I also take out my count. Oh, it's easier for me to see the full message, okay? And so here in my full message, I can right click on AWS region and I can say I want a parse selected key. And that will then add this key in here. And if I want to rename it and call it something different, I simply add an as clause. So those are familiar with SQL. This is just like SQL. And I'm going to call it AWS underscore region. Now, when I run this, my field here is called AWS underscore region. And then here are my values. So if you want to rename something, it's a simple as statement, as clause. Now, step 3 here is a no drop. And let me go back to this particular piece of code. And let me get rid of what's in here. And let me go back to my good old Apache error logs. Now in my Apache error logs, I see an IP address here that I really like and that I want to grab. Okay, notice right now, by the way, I've got 1,781 messages. So I could do a parse anchor on this IP address right here. And again, you want to anchor on the start of the collection and at the end of the collection. So that's why I'm grabbing both brackets. The right click here, parse selected text. Then I'm going to grab this IP address value itself, extract it, call it IP address. So now when I run this, watch what happens. I had 1,781 messages. When I run it now, I am down to 838 messages. Now, why? Why did it do that? Remember earlier I had mentioned that when you parse something, not only does it extract the field, but it also filters the information. And so it got rid of anything that didn't have an IP address. If you don't want it to do that, all you do is to append this following statement here, no drop. So you append no drop to it, and now I'm back to my original 1,846 messages. And I can see where I can extract an IP address where it found one, and some of these messages it didn't find that. So if you want to make sure, in fact, if you're running a query and you're doing some parsing and you're getting some strange results, we recommend, as a test question, we recommend that you apply the no drop solution to see what sort of behaviors and what things you might be dropping. Okay. All right. And that's what the no drop field does for us. The no drop field. So again, if I were to go in here and continue this on, and now I'm able to see, for example, here, you'll find that in my messages, I have 2 types of messages. I have a mod log SQL error message, and then I have my client with my IP address. So now if I wanted to parse anchor my mod log SQL message here, again, right click, parse selected text. This part is the stuff that I want. Extract it, call it message. Run this. And again, I'm down here to only 225 messages. Well, what happened is there's no drop statement here. And so it did this parse statement and dropped everything else. Now I can see here I have my message or I have my IP address. Okay, so now I'm seeing all my messages. So that no drop can be very, very handy and a very, very good troubleshooting thing for you if you're having issues. Okay. Okay. So yeah, if you're parsing something out, it's going to only parse it, extract that field out, but it's going to filter it. If it doesn't match the pattern, it drops it, it deletes it, it gets rid of it. The no drop prevents it from doing that. So if you're getting some strange results, we recommend you append the no drop statement in there, no switch, so that you can see what you're dropping. It's a good troubleshooting tool. Okay. So thank you. All right, moving right along back to this lovely little statement here. The next thing, I'm going to skip parse field for just a second. I want to do the parse multi first. So I'm going to take the parse multi, I'm going to take this code, I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it in. Now, we're looking here at our snort logs. And I don't know if you've ever seen or looked at a snort log before, but a snort log has two IP addresses. It has the source IP address and the source port. It has the destination IP address and the destination port. So when I parse out the IP address, looking for the pattern of IP address, what it does is it goes to this message, it finds the first IP address, it parses it out, and it says, I'm done. Next message, finds the first IP address, parses it out, and says, I'm done. Which is obviously not quite done. So what we want to do is we want to talk about another switch here. If I have multiple occurrences of a pattern match and I want to grab all those multiple occurrences, I want to add to this command the multi-switch. The multi-switch. Now, what's going to happen here is it's going to come across the first message, and it's going to realize that first message contains two IP addresses or two patterns that match. So what it's going to do is it's going to duplicate that first message. And then it's going to allow me to extract out the first IP address right there. Then it's going to go through here and extract out the second IP address right there. Then it's going to go to the second message. Again, two IP addresses. It's going to duplicate the message, extract out the first one, extract out the second one. So one of the things you'll notice is that it doubles the number of results here. The good news is we don't charge you by the results of your query. We charge you by what you ingest. So this has no bearing on what you're paying Sumo. Okay. But you will see this number double. And just to prove a point, let me comment out the multi. And you'll see I'm down to about 1,283. If I add the multi in there, my results effectively double because every message has a second IP address in there. So this is if you've got multiple occurrences of an IP address. This is one or multiple occurrences of anything. This multi-switch allows you to grab those multiple occurrences. So regardless of what pattern you're matching on, we have to match on an IP address here. Whatever you're matching on, like I said, if you got multiple occurrences of it in there, you can then go ahead and grab it. Any questions or concerns with that? So that's the multi. The last thing I want to talk about is in this chapter, this lab, is the parse field command. So if you extract out a field, like I'm looking at my GitHub logs, specifically, I'm looking for the committer word in those GitHub logs. And the reason I want the committer log in the GitHub logs is because I know the committer field has an email field. And so what I want to do is I want to do a parse anchor, and I want to parse out the email field. Now, the purpose of this exercise is if you have a field that's already parsed and you want to parse it even further, you must use the parse field equals command. And in my case, the field equals email. And then I'm going to specify my pattern, which is star at star. So I want before the @ sign and what's after the @ sign. Before the @ sign, I am going to call username. After the @ sign, I'm going to call that domain. So if you want to parse an already existing field, you can do that with a parse field equals command. earlier I'd mentioned these show up here by default alphabetically. If you want to change them, you can use the fields command. So I'm going to add another line here, type in another pipe in the command fields, and then I'm going to specify the order that I want them. I want username first, then I want domain, then I want email. And sure enough, it will change the order down here. Username, domain, and email. So that's how easy it is to change the structure of what you're seeing. Okay. Okay. Somebody asked the question, and we want to be able to take that multiple and we want to make them comma separated. You could use a parse anchor on the previous exercise where I want to parse these out separately. In fact, let me be very precise here. I'm going to use a parse anchor. So I'm going to swipe over this TCP IP. I'm going to grab all this stuff. Whoops, excuse me. Swipe over this TCP IP, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to do a parse anchor. Now, in this case, I want to grab this IP before the colon, and I am going to call this my source IP. Then I'm going to grab this field right here, highlight it, source port. Grab this IP right here. Excuse me, let's grab the whole IP. Destination port or destination IP, sorry. And this last one here is destination port. All right. So when I run this, that's how you can get those IPs probably in a better way. Okay, you can do a parse anchor instead of a parse multi. So it really depends what you're trying to accomplish. Yes?
Sorry to interrupt, John. I was basically asking, can we do it in one field, like just IP address and source IP, comma, destination IP?
Now, if it's okay, if you're doing this sort of a parse regex type statement and you want to check for multiple occurrences, it's not going to, the behavior of our product is that it will duplicate the messages. So it won't pull them out automatically. What you're going to have to do is you could then take these IP addresses and you can string concatenate them and do a bunch of other things to get probably the desired result. But there's no easy way with one command to be able to put those IP addresses in the same line.
So Ajit, yeah, John. So I would like to give some clarity here. So Ajit, this is Arun, and yes, you can do that. When you have multiple, like splitting of messages happens, you can actually utilize merge and transactionize operator to merge those two messages and like comma separate or whatever parameter you want to give, you can separate it using Sumo logic query. But that would be a like much advanced query. So I have just pasted the link for the merge operator and some examples are already given there. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, so hopefully that answers that question. And we just did that exercise and the parse multi we did. Okay. Field extraction rules, as I mentioned before, when I look in here and I'm looking at certain data sources, Snort is not one of them. But if I'm looking, for example, at my Apache logs, which again, let me see if I can find one of my Apache logs here. There I see a whole bunch of field, which are part of my field extraction rules, okay? And you can check these if you want to. In fact, you can also add these field names in your query. So just bear with me a second while I do something here real quick. Let me just make this Apache access, and let me run this real quick. So I've got a field here called status code, right? So I could say, and status code equals 304. Now, normally, when I am looking for just a 304, it's going to find 304 anywhere in my message. So it's going to filter and show me anywhere I've got a 304. That 304 could exist in my status code field. It could be part of my size. It could be part of my time in milliseconds. It could be whatever. But if I specify the field status code, now it's only looking for the 304 in the status code field. And this will work when you're running a log query, because we know what the status field is because it's part of our field browser. Where this will not work is if I try to run this in LiveTail. Remember, LiveTail is when I'm ingesting data into Sumo. We haven't processed field extraction rules yet. Therefore, it has no idea what the heck this thing is. If I get rid of this and just put in a 304, it can handle that. That's not an error. It'll process this. It may take a minute or two, but it'll process this. So it'll start ingesting and showing me data here just anytime now. Kevin, you can do it. There we go. There's my data. Okay. So the point is that field extraction rule field names do not work in a LiveTail. Okay. And that takes care of good old lab number 3. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and do lab number 4, then we're going to take a break. So we've got a break coming up here. Hey! In lab number 4, we want to talk about conditional operators. So I'm going to take this code right here, and I'm going to copy this code, and I'm going to paste it in. So new log search, paste in my code. Okay. First line is going to go after my Apache access logs. And then I'm going to do a parse anchor. I'm going to extract out my status code. Now, probably one of the most valuable things you're going to learn today is how to comment out multiple lines of code at the same time. So I'm going to comment out these 2 if statements and the sum statement at the bottom. The way I'm going to do that, if you're on a Windows keyboard, hold down your Alt key. If you're on a Mac keyboard, hold down your Option key. Your cursor will change to a plus sign. Then if you drag a line down, whatever you type across that line will get typed across all of those lines. To comment out a line here in Sumo, it's 2 forward slashes, right? Or in my case, I'll put in 2 forward slashes and a space. I like to improve readability. So that's how you can comment out a whole series of lines of code at the same time. And you hold down the Alt key if you're on a Windows keyboard, or the Option key if you're on a Mac keyboard. And you just drag a line down, and whatever you type gets applied across all those lines. So here, what I'm doing is I'm extracting out the status code. So here's my various status codes. That's what that parse anchor is doing. Now, what I'm going to do with this first if statement is I am going to create a new field called successes. And I'm going to see if my status code is equal to 200. And if it is, I'm going to put a 1 in successes. If not, I'm going to put a 0. So the way this if statement works is here's my condition, here's my true value, and here's my false value. So it's created me a new field called successes. And since this is not equal to 200, it puts a 0 in there, a 0 in there. This one's equal to 200, it puts a 1 in there. Then I have another if statement, which is going to create a field called client errors. And if it's a 404, it's going to put a 1 in there. Otherwise, it's going to put a 0 in. Now, you can put 1s and 0s in if you want. That's all fine, well, and good. But let's say that client errors cost you or your company a lot more money. So maybe you want to weigh them. Maybe instead of putting a 1 here, you want to put a 2 in here because it costs twice as much or whatever. You can actually impact your numbers so that when you calculate things, you can actually get an idea of what the gross impact is. So somebody asked a question, is it possible to add a case statement instead of multiple ifs? No, we don't have a case statement, case state operator. So no, good question. Don't have a real pretty answer for you there. I get it. So. All right, hang on a second. So Give me a second here. Changing 1 to 2. A 1 to 2 is just used to weight things. So you can apply a weight value here. Weight, W-E-I-G-H-T, weight. You want it to have more significance. That's by changing 1 to 2. All right. But right now, all it's doing is basically flagging these. This is a 404. This is a 200, that sort of thing. So if you don't need to weigh something, you don't have to. The reason I mention it is because you may see a test question about weighting something, making a value of 2. And after 4 passes, what's that number going to be, type thing. And then what I want to do is sum up my successes, which I'm going to call success count. I'm going to sum my client errors as client error count. So when I run this is going to create an aggregates tab because I've got a sum operator. And here in my sum operator, my aggregates tab, I've got a successes count and a client errors count. And there we go. And by the way, you can take those 2 sum statements and put them on the same line. Okay. Now here I'm testing for equality, right? My statement is I want to test for equality. And by the way, this is how we do an equality test. In some programming languages, it's equals equals. In ours, it's a simple equal. Okay. The next exercise here in lab 4 is doing a string match. So for a string match, we use the operator matches, and then we put things inside of double quotes. So if my status code matches or starts with a 4, I don't care what it ends with. I'm going to put a 1 there, call it client error. If my status code matches a 5, starts with a 5, I'll put a 1 in my server error. So you can also do string matches as well, besides aggregation. Okay. So that's our conditional operators. Any questions before we take a break? It's almost guaranteed 100% of the time not to get a question, because you guys probably want to take a break. Let's take 10. When this counter gets down to 0, I'd like you back here ready to go, and we will resume. So see you back in about 9 minutes and 53 seconds. Have a good break. And we're back. So that takes us to lab number 5. And in lab number 5, we want to talk about using subqueries to filter our data. And I think you're going to find that subqueries are a very powerful feature within Sumo logic. So let me basically explain to you what's going to go on here a little bit. Let me take this code and let me clear up my tabs here, first of all, before we get too far down the road. It's like Mamba number 5. Very good. All right. So if I run, and I'm going to go back here to 60 minutes here. If I run a log, I'm looking at my Apache Access logs, and I notice that different IP address, different IP address, different IP address, different IP address. Okay. So I'm seeing in the last 60 minutes what IP address has been accessing my web server and what pages and stuff they've been getting. All right. But in the case of a subquery, what I want to do is I may want to correlate two pieces of information. So I'm going to look at my Apache error logs, specifically for a message that says file does not exist /user/htdocs. Then I want to parse out the time, the error, and the IP address. And I want to count by my IP address. So I'm going to take this code of the section of code here, and I'm going to put in its own query, and I'm going to run it for 60 minutes. So I want to count by the IP address. Now I'm going to come at this last line for a simple reason. So when I did the count by IP address, the 89 messages that I got are all from the same IP address. This IP address, the same IP address. So when I do a count on it, I see there's only one count, one value. Okay. Now, if there wasn't a value, wasn't a single value, I could do a top K or a top. Now, the top function we have, well, I can specify that I want to see the top one value, or the top K, and I want to see the top one value. Top K has a ranking component in it. So when I do a top K and I want to see only the top one value based on count, it gives me here's the value, here was the count, and here's its ranking of number 1. Now, I don't really need the ranking. I could have done a top statement by it instead of a top K, and I would have gotten the same results. The point, though, is that I want to send back this IP address to this query, and I want to see where in my access logs where that user has been trying to go. And that's the value of using these subqueries. So in order to make this all work, as far as the subquery is concerned, I need to add a line to this. And I'm going to type in a pipe, and I'm going to use the command compose. And I'm going to compose the IP. I want to pass that back. And I'm also going to add the keywords. Okay. Now, what that does here in my aggregate section is it puts this IP address into a wrapper. You may recall back here in my query, I could specify my metadata tag and various keywords. And so what happens is, because I put the word keywords in this query, this subquery, it's going to basically run this parent query with the result of this. So I'm going to see in my Apache Access logs where that specific IP address was going. Now, I need to bring these two queries together in the same query. How do I do that? Well, first of all, a subquery is delineated by brackets, a start bracket and an end bracket. Also, my subquery starts with a tag subquery. Oops. And then a colon. Then I can paste this information in. Now, again, this keyword basically means I'm going to pass this back to my parent query, and I'm going to filter that parent query by this. So now when I run this, it's going to go find that IP address, find that count of that IP address. Then it's going to run my access logs through my access logs looking at that IP address. So the net result is I'm seeing that IP address in my access logs. What page is it trying to access? So I found a suspicious situation in my subquery, and I want to pass that information back to my parent query and look at where they've been trying to access. Does that all make sense? I hope so. Now, one thing, can I have subqueries inside of other subqueries? What do you think? Yes or no? Take a while, guys. Put it in the chat box. What do you think? Can I have subqueries inside of other subqueries? Yes. Okay. Should work. That's absolutely true. It does. So what happens is the lowest query runs first, and then it passes it back to its parent. And then that query runs and passes it back to its parent. So the point is that you could have subqueries inside of other subqueries. And this is where queries could start taking some time. Now, somebody mentioned in here in the chat about, please repeat things that, the concept here isn't too clear. So this subquery is looking at my Apache error logs, and it's finding, based on some sort of a message, file does not exist. It's basically breaking it down by IP address. And there's only one IP address. We're going to take that IP address and we're going to pass it back to our Apache access logs. And I want to see where that Apache where that user has been in our Apache access logs. What are they trying to access? So this subquery identifies my IP address and passes it back to my parent query. That's what this is all about. Okay. Is there a way for a parent query to pass field values to a subquery? I mean, we can use parameters and all that fun stuff. I'm not exactly sure what you're trying to accomplish here, Kishab. So if you could explain that to me, okay? By the way, speaking of subqueries, I haven't been really good about this and I need to be better at it. So I'm going to go in here. You'll find that we've got a subqueries in our documentation section. So if I click on this link, here is everything you want to know about subqueries. Okay. It talks about where subqueries are not supported. They're not exported, for example, in field extraction rules. But again, it gives us the expression, the syntax, passing in arguments, required arguments, optional arguments, all of that fun stuff. So you can, like I said, take advantage of this and use the heck out of this. This is one of the more powerful features here in the product, this idea of using subqueries. And again, I encourage you to check out the documentation. By the way, earlier when I did like the multi-switch, you can do a search for multi and you can find out about the multi-switch operator. So again, it talks in here about, multi-switch operator and no drop and all that fun stuff. So you can look, anything I'm talking about, you guys can look up in our product documentation. And I would encourage you to do that. Okay, sorry about that. Just clicked on my camera by accident. Okay. All right. So that takes care of that lab. Now, another lab that people love is lab number 6, the geo lookup operator. So let's take a look at that. Let me take this code that's here. Let me copy the code that's here. And let me paste it in here to Sumo Logic. Okay. Excellent. All right. So first line, I'm looking at my Apache access logs. Then I'm doing a parse anchor to get my IP address. So the rest of these lines for right now, I'm going to go ahead and comment out. So again, I parsed out the IP address. There we go. A bunch of different IP addresses. Life is good. Now, we have a partnership with a company called Newstar. And Newstar allows us to use our lookup command, and our lookup command can do a lot of things. But in this case, we are going to pass to Newstar. And the way you read a lookup command, by the way, is at the end. You read it backwards. You start at the end. So we're going to pass in client IP, which we got from this previous step. Going to pass in as IP. We're going to go to this URL, which is really going to Newstar. And we're asking Newstar to give us the latitude and the longitude of that IP address. Now, if I go here to my lab, and by the way, it talks about the geo lookup operator. If I open that up in a new tab, you'll see that my geo lookup operator can give me latitude, longitude, continent, country code, country name, region, city, state, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All kinds of neat stuff. Now, to render this as a map box plot, I need to have three things. I need to have latitude, I need to have longitude, and I need to have count. So here in my query, I'm getting my latitude and longitude. So as I run this, I'm now seeing the latitude and longitude. Here's my IP address. Here's the latitude and longitude of that IP address. Then I'm going to count it by latitude and longitude. Then if I want to, I can sort my count, sort it by, if you don't specify it, sort it in descending order. But here, I now enabled this button right here, this little icon, and that button allows me to render this as a map. Now, the first thing you might notice is it looks like I've got, for example, here's the Americas hemisphere, and here is the Eastern hemisphere. And then see the Western hemisphere again. And you might ask, why is that? That's because of how it renders across the X and Y axes. If I put this in a dashboard, it will render it properly. Or if I could make this go a little higher, it would automatically adjust and render it properly. But this is a map box plot. And as long as I have latitude, longitude, and count, I'll be able to click on this menu, this map box plot visualization, and it will render. If for some reason I don't have latitude, longitude, and count, I only now have latitude and count, I cannot click this button. So in order to be able to render this as a map box plot, I must have latitude, longitude, and count. Additionally, not only can I ask for latitude and longitude, but I can ask for things like country name, region. And then if I want to, I can aggregate by country name, region. There's country name, region, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So this is a really powerful feature that our customers really like. The ability to be able to display things in a map. The ability to be able to break down our data in a map. Okay. All right. Lab number 7, the difference operator and the smooth operator. Copy this code. I'm going to paste this stuff in there. But I'm going to make this about 60 minutes. So again, I'm looking at my Apache access logs. I'm creating 1-minute buckets. And since I'm looking at 60 minutes, I'm going to have 60 1-minute buckets. I want to count by my time slice. I want to sort my time slices in ascending order. So that's all pretty straightforward. Let me comment out my difference operator just yet. So here are my results. Time slices are in order. Counts are there. Now we're going to use the difference operator. Now, what does the difference operator do for me? Quite frankly, it takes this value minus this value and gives me this value. This value minus this value and gives me this value. This value minus this value and gives me this value. And you may ask yourself, well, what good does that do? I put this on sort of a line chart, right? Here's my actual values. And again, I apologize, but anytime you're doing inventory control or something like that, this works really well. So I'm thinking in terms of COVID. This is why I apologize. These are my COVID patients. And as my COVID patients go down, the number of my patients go down, that means the number of my available beds goes up. So I can see my difference might show me what my inventory is on hand as far as available beds as my COVID patients go up or down. In fact, if you wanted to, like I said, this is your value, this is your difference. You can also go in here if you want to and click on the gear icon. And under the change series, you can tell this, instead of displaying it as a line chart, you can make it a combo chart. And I can also, instead of using the default axes over here, I can tell it to use the secondary axes, which it'll put over here, Y2. So here's my numbers for this axis. Here is my numbers for my columns that are showing up. So there are lots of different ways of displaying this differently if you want to create some sort of a combination chart. That's my difference operator. And if you like that, I'm sure you're going to be absolutely excited over the smooth operator. The smooth operator is designed to give me a rolling average. Again, this is all the same code we've seen before. What's new here is that in my count, instead of using it and being called underscore count, I've renamed it. I put an as clause in here, so I'm going to call it error count. And I'm going to count it based on my time slices. Then I'm going to sort my time slices. So let me comment out my smooth operator real quick, just so you can see what's going on. And these are in order. There's my counts. Now, if I throw in my smooth operator, what it's basically doing is it's taking this one number and dividing it by 1. Taking these first 2 numbers, adding them together, divided by 2. Taking these first 3 numbers, added together, divided by 3. First 4 numbers, added together, divided by 4. First 5 numbers, added together, divided by 5, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, till it gets to 10. Once it gets to 10, it's going to add the next number in, drop the oldest number, and divide it by 10. So typically it keeps focused on that number 10. And then, like I said, it comes up this rolling average. So what happens when I run this is I can see my rolling average is this light blue line rolling back here. So again, let's say this is my checking account. Money's going in, money's going out, and every day my money, goes in, goes out, whatever. Well, I want to see how it's doing as more of a rolling average. That's what that rolling average function gives you, a better sense for what's happening. Kind of takes out the peaks and the valleys and kind of gives it to you in a more, digestible fashion. So I can see how much change or how much delta I have between my rolling average and my various peak values here. Okay. Is there a way to calculate rolling sum? Well, let's do this. Do we have a rolling sum? Rolling sum, John, not rolling dumb, sorry. Standard deviation, sum. Short answer is I don't know, but you can certainly look into it. Okay. I'm sure there's a way to do a rolling sum now that I think about it. So, yeah. Anyway,
I think, John, it is accum operator.
Oh, yeah, the accum operator. Okay, there you go. Thank you. You're right. Yep. Use the accum operator. Good. All right. Labs 8 and 9 go together very nicely. So in lab 8, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my snort logs. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and clean this stuff out of here, close these tabs up just to clean it up. And then I'm going to go grab a new log source, and I'm going to grab source category equals lab/snort. All right. Now, what these snort logs tell me, they tell me any security incidences that have been going on over the last 60 minutes, okay? So over the last 60 minutes, I have almost 6,000 messages to go through. And I got to be honest with you, I don't necessarily want to read 6,000 messages. So is there a better way? And there is. With Sumo Logic, there's a much better way. I can invoke a log reduce, and what that log reduce will do is it will combine my like messages together. So it's going to look at the messages themselves, and it's going to combine the like messages together. So out of the 5,904 messages I got over the last 60 minutes, 2,970 are this message. log port configuration, config file access, okay? So the snort log detected this and said there is a config file access. Now, you notice I got some thumbs up and thumbs down here. If I have nothing selected, it's going to give it a relevance based on the count and based on, basically the count and the value. Now, if I figure this is really something that's very, very important, this is an attempted information leak, this is a problem, I can give it a thumbs up and give it a relevant score of 10 right off the get-go. Make it very important. Or if I investigate this and discover it's really not about anything, what happened is when somebody ran the setup program or an update program, it tried to access that file. And so it's not an attack at all. It's actually very benign. And I can change its relevant score by giving it a thumbs down. So it has a default relevant score, and it has a relevant score that you can specify, maximize it or minimize it yourself. So you can go through here and you can specify and adjust some of the things that need to be important. So for example here, this responses, gobbles SSH file, successful administrative privilege gain, that is significant. And if I want to, where it says count of 72, I can click on that and it's going to show me the 72 messages that made that up. And I can look into this. Now, also in these messages, when I'm looking at these 72 messages, this particular host right here, if I want to look at the log messages that happened plus or minus 1 minute, I can do that, or plus or minus 5 minutes, or plus or minus 10 minutes. So by host, or by name, or by category, I can go plus or minus 1, 5, or 10 minutes. So these make some great test questions in here. Another thing I wanted to mention to you, if I go back here for a second, back to my snort log, I can also open these things up if I want to and split these messages out if I want to. So lots of interesting features in here. And by the way, here are my original messages back here that I can look at. But this log reduce compares our patterns and basically tells us when we have certain matching patterns. Here in the patterns, when I see stars, that means the values have changed for a specific thing. So whenever I see stars, it's like, the TCP IP address may have changed, but the basic message is still the same across, just the value of the IP address of the port may have changed. So that's what those stars denote. Now, again, I'm concerned, is there a security threat here? Is there something I need to be concerned about? Well, if I do a log reduce, again, now I've got an idea of what's happening and I can see where my threats might be coming from. So that's a good indicator. But maybe also what I want to do is compare this to see if things are getting better or things are getting worse. And so I have a log compare function that I can click on. And you notice it just changes and adds the pipe log compare, and it's going to go back to yesterday. So what a log compare does is it takes my current logs minus 60 minutes, does a log reduce on that. Then it's going to go back 24 hours, do another log reduce for 60 minutes, compare that. Then it's going to compare these two. Now, when I do these log compares, and actually, hold on a second, something's not right. I don't think I ran this. I should see. I will see. Okay. I'm expecting to see a percentage of difference is what I'm expecting to see. So bear with me a second. My percentage of difference has gone away. Usually I used to see here a percentage that said whether things increased or decreased. So I would normally see, like I said, my percentage of difference here. And actually, hold on a second. That's things are changing here. Hold on. Again, I'm looking to see a percent. I normally expect to see a percentage of difference. And then I also may see words like gone or new. New means it wasn't there in the previous time shift, but it's there now. Gone means it was there in the previous time shift, but it's not there now. So, but you used to see percentages here. And I suspect something may have changed. So I got to look into that a little bit. Okay. Yep. And so shall I put in here that the code that's actually in here? I do not need this statement. So somebody grabbed this code and said, you know, we can do that. I don't need this absolute delta percentage in there for time shift to work. Interesting. Hold on. Let's try to see what happens here. I'm going to make this 60 minutes. Okay, good. So let me comment out this last line. There was something wrong with my data, I suspect, in my snort logs, which is why it didn't work. So this log compare, as I said, is taking my current time minus 60 minutes, doing a log reduce on it. Then it's going back 24 hours, going back 60 minutes and doing a log reduce on that. And then it's comparing the two. So here, this one is up 3.1%. This one is up 57%. This one is up 33%. The other ones haven't changed, by the way, 24%. And so I can see basically what's happening. Now, I may see things, like I said, the word gone, which means it was there previously, but it's not there now. I also may see something that says new. Let me go back to the preceding page here. Preceding page here. There we go. There's some new in there as well. Now, so here I'm looking for, I'm seeing all the various scores and the various counts and all that. Now, what I can do is I can say, look, I only want to see those values where the absolute, whether it's plus or minus is irrelevant, the delta percentage is greater than 25%. So now that's going to filter and show me where my delta percentage here is 25% plus or minus. It doesn't make any difference. And so that's what that where clause is going to do. So here I'm seeing 64%, 36%, 26%, 32%, et cetera, et cetera. Anytime there's not a percentage, it will show it to you anyway. So there we go. And that's what that's all up to. All right. Lab number 10. We've got about 4 labs left. Lab number 10, identifying the out of the ordinary events. This is using our outlier. And again, if I open up this document link here for outlier, I can see that outlier, we're going to pass it 4 parameters. Those 4 parameters are my window, my threshold, my consecutive value, and my direction. So the best thing for me to do is to show you this code example and walk you through this code example. So bear with me a second while I learn how to copy and paste. And again, let me make this, let's make this 3 hours. So again, I'm looking at my Apache access log for the status code of equal to 404. I'm creating 1-minute buckets. I'm doing a count of my status code that I'm going to call error code by my time slices. And before I run the outlier function, I'm going to show you what I've got here. So bear with me a second. That little error message I got was nothing. It was just I double clutched on the start button. So here I'm seeing my error count and I'm seeing my times. Great. Now you notice these times aren't in any order. when I use the outlier function, just like the transpose function this morning, it will automatically put them in the right order. So when I run the outlier function, again, I've got error count, which is what I'm basically processing. A window equals 10, which means I'm going to go plus or minus 10. I'm sorry, I'm going to go back 10 data points. My consecutive equals 1. I'll talk about that in a second. Threshold is equal to 3. I'll talk about that as well as my direction. So what happens is when I run this, it's going to take this error count. It's going to go back 10 data points, and it's going to calculate my, hang on a second. It's going to calculate my mean and my standard deviation. Then using that standard deviation, it's going to go, since the threshold value is 3, it's going to go plus or minus 3 standard deviations, and it's going to calculate an upper and a lower boundary. So the question is my value within my upper and lower boundary? And I can see this way. I can also see it if I turn it into a line chart. So again, here I have my values, and then my cloud behind it, that blue cloud, is my upper and lower boundaries. And if I'm outside of my upper or lower boundaries, I'm displaying a red triangle. Those are my outliers. Now, bear with me a second here. Okay. Okay. So those are my outliers. Now, this is all fine, well and good. What does the consecutive value of 1 mean? What does the direction plus or minus mean, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So first of all, let me get some more outliers in here. So I'm going to change this to like 2.2. Again, that means I'm going to go plus or minus 2.2 standard deviations. So I can see outliers above and below. Now, let's assume for a second that I'm in manufacturing. And in manufacturing, I'm looking at my average product defects, right? So I'm looking when they're above average, when they're below average. Well, quite frankly, I don't care about below average defects. I don't want to see them. So where it says direction plus or minus, if I get rid of the minus and I rerun this, I don't see any outliers below. So this direction thing, plus or minus, do you want to see outliers that are above average or below average? What do you want to see? And you can control that with that plus or minus sign. Okay. Again, the threshold is the amount of standard deviation that you want to use. The window is how many data points do I go back to calculate things. Now, the consecutive gets to be kind of a fun conversation. So let's talk about the consecutive value. Let me go back to my numeric data, okay? My consecutive value is equal to 1, which means that if anything is outside of my boundary, I'm going to identify it as an outlier, right? This number 24 is outside my upper boundary. I flag it. And because my consecutive value is equal to 1, anything that's outside, I flag it as an outlier. Now, maybe that's not really the case. Maybe I need 2 of these in a row before I consider it to be an outlier. So if I look at my line chart, I now see that even though I've got values that occasionally peak out and are above my upper range, the next value is back in range. So I can define that I need 2 of these in a row before I consider it a true outlier. In fact, if I look at my numbers for this, let me jump to my numbers. Let me jump ahead here to a couple pages so I can find that outlier. There we go. So here, my error count was 28, which is above my upper. So I flag it, but I need 2 of these in a row. My next one is a value of 25. It is also above my upper range. Now I've got 2 of these. Now it's an outlier. So my consecutive value is how many things do I need out of bounds in a row consecutive before I consider it to be an outlier. So as you can see, this is kind of a handy little tool to see, your various business processes and all that stuff. This could be your employee churn or, your employee hiring process or whatever, to see where things may be going awry for you. It's really kind of a neat statistical function, very powerful. And I think you'll generally enjoy the heck out of it. Okay. By the way, I'm going to come back to this outlier function. I'm going to get rid of everything else but the outlier function. Close all the other tabs. And then I'm going to go ahead and move on into future trends, the predict operator. Now, the predict operator comes in two flavors. There's a linear regression model and there's an auto regression model. So if I open up the documentation for it, you'll see that we can either use auto regression or linear regression. And depending on the syntax of how you use the predict operator, it automatically figures out whether you're using auto regression or linear regression. So in our case, we're going to simply use linear regression in our example here, in our lab. So if I take this code and I copy it, oops, excuse me, and I put it in my Sumo logic environment here, and if I change this to say 3 hours, and I run this. Now, what am I doing? Again, I'm looking at my Apache access logs for a status code of 404. Then I'm going to create 1 minute buckets. And since I've got 3 hours of them, it'll be about 180 buckets, right? 180 minutes, 180 buckets. Then I'm going to count my status code, call it error count by time slice. So again, this is going to produce the same results we saw a moment ago. And I comment out the predict operator. Now, when I put the predict operator in place, what it's doing is the predict operator is calculating in this case, a linear regression model. And here is the slope of my linear regression model, the various data points. And basically, if I take my error count minus this, I get my difference. And so when I look at this across my line, here are my respective data points going up and down. And then here I can see that my line appears to be sloping downward just a little bit. Now, it's all a matter of perspective. In this case, if I'm looking at my revenue and I see my line sloping down, that's probably not a good thing, right? I expect my revenue to increase over time. Now, this is my cost. I'd say maybe this is good stuff because, again, it's decreasing over time. So the point is you can use this to kind of get an idea of where things are going so you can see overall how your business is doing. Again, this is the linear regression model. There's also an auto regression model that, again, it's not a line, it's not a straight line, it's not flat, that you can use as well. So the predict operator. 2 more labs left, the transaction operator. Now, the transaction operator is kind of a neat operator if you have information in your logs that talks kind of about state, if you will. So let me take this code and let me bring it into Sumo. Let's go for 24 hours. Now, what this code is doing is it's looking at a different log segment called ecomark. And it's parsing out the IP address in my ecomark logs. And then it's going to go through all the messages in there, transaction based on IP address. And if it has the word confirmation in it, we're going to put it in the confirmation bucket. If it has the word order shipped in it, we're going to put it in the order shipped bucket. If it has the cart in it, we're going to put cart bucket and so forth and so on. Then what I want to do is I want to see all the different from and to states. So I want to see when it moved from cart to cart or cart to order shipped or cart to confirmation. So what happens is when I run this, I'm going to see in my aggregates table from state to state. And I can see how things went from state to state. And more importantly, I have a sand key diagram that I can use so that I can see that my customers added a total of 31,745 things to their carts. Hang on, let me move the cart over here. Okay. And it looks like they looped back a couple times. They took something out of the cart and brought it back, looped, back. Again, some sort of indecisiveness there with regards to what they want to purchase. From that, they went to shipping information. And out of the 46,679 total objects there, the shipping information, 5634. So somewhere along the line, the customers, I did lose some of the transactions for the shipping stuff. And then I lost a lot of it when they went to order ship. Now, maybe they didn't finish the process. Maybe they didn't like the payment. Maybe they didn't like the shipping charges, whatever. So this is where I need to investigate to see why things kind of fell down here. But my transaction operator gives me the ability to see various states of transactions to see how my customer transactions are going. And then I can look at my logs to see why things are dropping, why things are changing. Did my customer get frustrated? Were they declined on the credit card payment? What caused this number to go down so drastically? And then, I'm sorry, confirmation is actually the next number, and then orders shipped. Obviously, for every confirmation, I want to make sure I've shipped an order based on that confirmation. So you can see your transactional data. Now, something else in our product that we've recently added that we're getting ready to put some training about in the Illuminate is this concept of seeing transactional data and seeing traces and activity of traces associated with our transactional data. Let me find a better example here. There we go. So I can see the various states of transactions. And in this case, this is about a coffee bar. And in the coffee bar, of course, somebody places their order, right? And then the barista proceeds to make it with the machine. So the barista sits and grinds the beans, adds the water and all that stuff. So we can see all the various steps of what occurs where there's problems. And then it goes to the cashier to get checked out and all that sort of thing. So this is something new that we've recently added that we'll be talking about here and Illuminate, another way of looking at your transactional data. Okay, so stay tuned. And then that takes care of lab 12. Now, lab 13 was about those meaningful alerts. So remember I mentioned our earlier class, we had a conversation about alerts that did not do this topic justice. Okay, and so let's talk about that. Please repeat, new thing added. Okay, fair enough. I mentioned to you guys, I'll need to take care of that. In Sumo, we have added things like service maps and traces and all that sort of thing recently. And traces allow you with open telemetry to see various transactions that are occurring and seeing how those transactions are behaving. So here, I can go in here and I'm really looking for some old data because these aren't showing a lot of breakouts. Let me see if I can filter this a little bit. Coffee lover, there we go, for any span. Okay, so that data's been gone. All right, I can't really show you a good example here. I'm sorry, guys. But normally when you've got transactional activity, you can see how that transaction occurs. Maybe I'm doing some sort of a payment system, some sort of a coffee manufacturing system where, can I grind the beans? I add the water. I'm out of beans. I got a problem. I can't fulfill the order. If I'm out of beans or water, I can't fulfill the order. If the client's charge is declined, I can't fill the order. So you can see the various activity and stuff here. Bottom line is I probably shouldn't have opened up this can of worms and just said that we'll talk about it in Illuminate. So it's another way of looking at your transactional data. That's why I pointed it out. Now, and it's our new method, if you will. So now here, no problem. Are the trace headers added by custom libraries? Actually, we use open telemetry for the trace headers. So lab 13, creating meaningful alerts. Now, we created this blog post in our public facing site because if you're going to create alerts, they need to be meaningful alerts. And what makes a meaningful alert? The alerts have to be actionable. They have to be directed. So this isn't as simple as I want to schedule something to run. No, I want to schedule something to run and I want to make sure you're aware there's a problem, okay? And your action, you need to take action on this. So it's a really good article with regards to that. And my point is that here for our meaningful alerts, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here to my Sumo logic environment. I'm going to go back to my outlier. Now, if I run this over the last 3 hours, or if I run this over, say, the last 24 hours, if I don't have any outliers, do I want to be notified? No, I probably don't. Okay. So I only want to be notified when I have outliers. In fact, if I look at my numbers here, what I'm looking at here is I want to be notified when my error count violation is greater than 0. So we recommend here that you want to add a where clause, and you only want to see the information of when you have outliers. So this is where I mentioned this morning, our conversation about alerts does not do the topic justice. And so error, so make sure I get this error underscore count underscore violation greater than 0. So now when I run this, because of this filter, now I'm only seeing the outliers. I'm only seeing the outliers. In fact, let me take this back to 3 hours. Okay. So only get 2 outliers in the last 3 hours. That's the stuff that you typically want to see, right? You don't want to see everything's running fine, everything's running fine, everything's running fine, everything's running fine. No, I want to wake you up when something's gone wrong. And so one of the things that we're advocating here in this lab is to make a alert meaningful. You typically want to add a where clause to it. So you're only showing me when the problem exists. Don't bother me if the problem doesn't exist. Okay. So that's one message I want you to take out of this. And then again, we talked about creating alerts. You're going to save as. You schedule this search. Again, you pick a time frame. Again, maybe you want to notify folks of email or script or whatever. Maybe you send something through Slack, whatever. But here, under send notification, you can send it every time the search is run, but you can also say if the following condition is met. And the following condition turns out to be a series of operators, greater than, less than, or equal to, and then this number of results. This number of results is the number of records you get in your query. So if I get, the only time I want this to fire is when I get a record here. If I don't get a record here, don't send this. Don't bother anybody. If I do get a record here, I want you to send it. Okay. So that's one form of alert. And we've had that part of our product for quite some time. Recently, we've been adding alerts. We had metric alerts, we had log alerts, and we've decided to unify them. So can we select the format for when sending an email like chart or whatever? Let me hold that question for just a second, okay? In this tool, you can specify what you want in your email, but you can't specify the format. In our new alerts, you can control that a bit more. So that's why I'm hedging that bet, okay? Now, another way that you can do alerts, and something I didn't mention before, is we've got this add monitor link. If I click on this add monitor link, it's going to go into my monitors. It's going to take this code and it's going to generate an alert. It's going to set up an alert. Now, I could do this another way. Let me take this code, copy it. Let me get out of here by clicking the Xbox. Discard this. You could go into our Sumo logic environment under manage data. Here is our alerts. Now, these alerts are designed to be universal. You can create metric alerts, you create log alerts, they're all going to be right here. And you and I can see the status of those alerts, whether they've hit critical values, whether they're normal, whether they're disabled, whether they're at a warning level. We can see what's going on. Now, I mentioned I could click that link that says add monitor. I could also go over here and I could add a new monitor. And here is where I would paste my code. So it's going to execute this code. And then I can define my criteria. So the first thing I want to do is I want to be notified if I'm missing data. In other words, this thing's supposed to produce data all the time, and all of a sudden I'm not getting data. So I can pick, if I don't start seeing data every 10 minutes, let me know. Now, not only will we notify you of when an alert occurs, but we're also going to tell you when a problem gets solved. So we'll notify you when recovery happens. So we defined the trigger types here, whether we're missing data, what our warning value is. Hang on a second. Why is this not showing me a value here? I'll bet you I know why. Okay, tell you what. Discard. Back to my query here. Again, adding monitor does exactly the same thing. Okay, only this time I've got a chart. So again, I can say I want to be notified when I'm missing data, right? And maybe every 10 minutes. And I'm sorry, if I'm missing data for 10 minutes, notify me. I can also say I want to achieve a warning level. Now, in the case of my warning level, when I get to maybe a 2.5, so if I get to 2.5, greater than 2.5, I want you to know. So anything under 2.5, I'm fine. Anything above 2.5, I'm going to generate a warning level. And then I also have it notify me when we recover. And I can make these the same levels, or I can make them different. So I can make it like a safety valve. Or I can also set a critical alert. So maybe at 3.5 or maybe at 4, I want to set a critical value. So you decide your trigger types and your thresholds. Then you decide, how do you want to notify folks? So here is where if I select email, create a new email, I can specify who I want to send this to. Again, I can put in my subject line all kinds of static and dynamic text. And then down here, I can customize my message. Okay. And then I can say I want this to be fired off when I'm missing data. I recover from missing data. Warning alert, warning recovery, critical alert, critical recovery. So the bottom line is that you can customize this a little bit more. Now, maybe you want to create an email. Maybe you want to send a Slack message. Maybe you want to send a Microsoft Teams message. Maybe you want to activate pager duty, whatever. Bottom line is you decide what activity that you want for each of these conditions. And then you can have additional notifications. Then you can name this and send it, save this. And when you name it and send it, and I'm not going to save it, then here, then here, I will be able to see my alert and see its status. And then additionally, it will notify somebody, it'll send you an email, it'll activate your pager duty, it'll do whatever it needs to do based on the logic that you put in there. Now, one other thing, you can also put these inside of folders. So you can create a folder if you want to, and then put all your monitors for that folder inside that folder. And so again, as long as they're disabled, you won't see any status indicators. But you could create and organize things however you want to. This is another way we're doing alerts. Okay. So it's not part of the class, but I thought I'd show it to you anyway. Anyway, what questions have you before I start throwing you out to take the exam? What questions have we? Okay. Yeah, I just want to show you some of the new stuff. Some of the new stuff's kind of fun. All right. So that takes care of this class. Again, I remind you this class, this test is open note, open book, open slides, et cetera, and I'm here to help you. If you would, let's log out of the training environment. Why? Because you're logged in as training analyst, whatever number, right? That's not you. We want you to log out of the training environment, Again, click on your account down here and click sign out. And then we want you to log into the environment that you logged into this morning to take that exam. So we want you to log into your company's Sumo Logic environment, or if you created a demo environment, that one too. So you're going to sign in. So down here in the corner, it has your first name and your last name. And what we want you to do is, since we went through the rigmarole of making sure that we could access the LMS, the testing area, this morning, we shouldn't have to worry about that today. So again, go to Home, go to Certification, click on Get Certified. And then when you click on Get Certified, what we want to this time is we want the Search Mastery tile. That's the class that you're in, Search Mastery. Again, there's a self-paced course. Here is the exam in English. Here is the exam in Japanese. Here is the exam in Spanish. Again, when you take the exam, when you click on it, you may have to register. Click on this registration button. Boom, it'll take a minute. You're registered. Boom, that's how quick it is. And then also, when you take the exam, don't forget to hit that submit button so that it adds it to your profile so that you get credit for it. Okay. So again, just to remind you, again, don't follow me. Don't do anything just yet. Just watch. So again, I start here at 30 questions, 60 minutes to complete, open book, open notes. You can even hit the instructor up for a question. Passing score is 75. Go for it. Good luck. When I go to the exam here, here's my 1 hour counter, and I got 30 questions. As I scroll down, my counter starts. And so assuming the following query, how would you alert on an outlier violation? So here's my outlier function, right? So I want to sit there and add the following before I schedule. That's the where clause. I want where my error violation is greater than 0. And that's what we want to do. That's what we mentioned. Parsing operators extract fields by identifying patterns in your logs. What is the pattern option that allows you to include all messages in your result, including those that don't match the parsing pattern? So you want to include all messages in your result, including those that don't match your parsing pattern. That's no drop. Okay. So I'm going to go through the first couple of questions here. And then, as I said, I'm going to go ahead and score this. And I failed. Obviously, I got 2 questions right. The first 2 I answered. Yay me. The rest of them I can see I got wrong. But here's that button that you want to submit. If you pass it, submit it so it adds it to your profile. If you don't click this button, it's not going to add to your profile. Quite frankly, the exam didn't happen. So when you pass it, don't forget to click this button. That's my only concern. Okay, there you go. So, ladies and gentlemen, give you guys time to take the exam. When you're done with the exam, you are done and free to sign out. Have yourselves a wonderful day. In fact, let me turn my camera on for a second. As the sun is starting to come out here in the U.S. East Coast, I want to thank you all very much for your time and effort today. I know it's been a long day, and hopefully see you again. Of course, we'll see you again tomorrow. Josh, my boss, will be here teaching you guys about the security and the observability workshop. So otherwise, I want to thank you. And again, if there's anything I can do for you, let me know. Otherwise, go take that exam. Let's call it a day. And please be safe out there. As was mentioned earlier, I hope we see you all face-to-face at some point in time. We get to do this face-to-face instead of this virtual live stuff. So until that day, I look forward to it. You guys have a great day. Please be safe. I'm going to stop my sharing. I'm going to stop my recording. And I'm going to let you guys take your exam. I will be here